Hello and welcome back to my second review. So today, as promised, we will be talking about The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga. I know, it's been 2 months and my last and first video was in January. And if you're wondering what I'm wearing right now, I'm actually wearing pajamas. I'm recording this on a Sunday and I think I deserve to wear pajamas. Although by my lack of consistency, I'd say I don't deserve it. Now the movie came out on Netflix and I have thoughts. I have like lots of them. So I read the book first before I go on Netflix, and the book is really something. I was intrigued by the trailer that was released and I was excited for the movie as well, with Rajkumar Rao and Priyanka and the actor Ardash Gaurav. This book after all won the Booker Prize Award, so I think it's only fair that I check it out before the movie. It is narrated by Balram, the main character, the white tiger, the thinking man, entrepreneur, as he narrates his journey to the Chinese Prime Minister. From here we get to see his ascension or descension, however you see it, from the darkness into the light.
Out of the darkness into the light.
I gave this book 5 stars on Goodreads. In this video, I'll start with analyzing the book and its theme and a little bit about the movie. I would highly recommend reading the book first before the movie, but trigger warning because it's really dark and it has a lot of dark humor, especially a bunch of racist and sexist jokes. If it's something that could make you uncomfortable, then yeah, fair warning. The video will be divided into themes, so the quotes I picked from the book will not be in chronological order. So spoilers ahead, you have been warned. So the book starts with how he got his second name, because his family calls him Munna, which literally means just boy. It's not even a name. It's just like, it's like calling your kid as kid or calling your son as son, when that is literally his name. So his teacher named him Balram, the name of Lord Krishna's sidekick. In the movie, he was named Balram by his family from the beginning, so you can see how he actually started off worse in the book. He came from Lakshmangar, where the river Ganges starts, where they send away their dead, also where their dead are kind of forgotten. I guess a symbolic way of saying he is forgotten even on the day he was born. Starting his journey with a new name, it's like forming his new identity. A name is such a huge symbol in someone's life, and I think it's kind of a telling on how he wasn't even given any on his birth. And you'll find a lot of these in the story where Adiga uses motifs repetitively. I ended up highlighting a bunch of things. I think I've never highlighted this much in a novel before. This is probably one of the most thematically rich books I've ever read. Now, being an outsider, I don't really know what's the real economic, social, and political issues in India, except for what was given to me by news and secondhand accounts. So for the sake of this review, I'm going to make things clear that my judgments are solely based on the interpretation of the book and its representation of India. I didn't go on Goodreads until after I finished reading because I don't want the reviews to affect my judgment. Once I finished it, and the ratings really baffled me, like 3.87 stars something. Like really, I mean, even the crappiest book that I've read got a rating of 4 stars something. The world has really turned upside down. And when I read some of the reviews, I see a lot of butthurt people being butthurt for ridiculous reasons. This is probably the same people who doesn't like Slumdog Millionaire. As an outsider, I perfectly understand that this does not represent all of India, but it is a side of India that exists. Every country, there is always that kind of place, that kind of slums. And the story is told from a perspective of one man who just happens to have this kind of experience in his life. Not every story can encompass the experience of many. Plus, if I'm a middle-class person of India, should I be offended that I'm not represented in this novel at all? This is about him, the main character, his journey from Munna to Balram to the White Tiger. It is a dark book, a gloomy, grimy, even a disgusting representation of the country, but no one should be offended by it. It's just one person and the story is told from his perspective. He is both the narrator and a character. That's just what he meant to be, and if there's anything that I know about the first person POV is that we're dealing with an unreliable narrator. You're not supposed to take everything at face value. Plus, the story is mixed with the characters' opinions as we see everything through his eyes, and we easily slip into his side of the story. And people are allowed to have different experiences, to feel the world differently than others. Some have it good, some have it bad. It's just that simple. There's really nothing to be offended about, at least for me. But if you're still offended, then explain, because I really don't get the hate. And then there goes about his upbringing in Lakshmangarh, and he refers to his hometown as darkness. He was all,
I was born in it, molded by it.
And then he talks about his mother's funeral and how she was sent off in such a grand way, much grander than how she lived, which means she had lived a crappy life in the hands of her terrible in-laws, like one of those Sasbaho serials that I used to watch as guilty pleasure. Which river of death, whose banks are full of rich, dark, sticky mud, whose grip traps everything that is planted in it, suffocating and choking it and stunting it. Why, I'm talking of Mother Ganga, daughter of the Vedas, river of illumination, protector of us all, breaker of the chain of birth and rebirth. Khaleesi, you have a contender. The irony of something that purifies become poison is really obvious. The reality of his supposed destiny also lies in the old temple nearby his home. This is Hanuman, everyone's favorite god in the darkness, and we worship him in our temples because he is a shining example of how to serve your masters with absolute fidelity, love, and devotion. In a way of saying that he has to fight set destiny in him.
What is it that you want to do?
I want to serve you and Ashok sir.
No, you can't possibly believe that.
Why did I feel I had to go close to his feet, touch them and press them and make them feel good? Why? Because the desire to be a servant has been bred into me and poured into my blood, the way sewage and industrial poison are poured into Mother Ganga. The main direction that the story focuses on is about huge class discrepancy, but the underlying message is how people can be half-baked. In Slumdog Millionaire, Dev's life is a series of events leading up to his destiny to win the show. Those events gave him the knowledge to break out of his life of poverty. You can call it destiny or coincidence, whatever you think. But I'm not focusing on how he won the contest. I'm focusing on his view of the knowledge he accumulated through his life. Both stories are about discrimination in social classes, but where Slumdog Millionaire goes towards a more inspirational, escapist road, even how you should stay good no matter what, which I highly agree. The White Tiger paints a really different, darker picture of society.
I was trapped. And don't believe for a second there's a million-rupee game show you can win to get out of it.
Dev's road is paved with pain that would eventually become his greatest strength, whereas Balram scoured and stole his information, not that he didn't experience pain. The difference between the two is how differently they dealt with the hardship and the decision they eventually take in search of happiness. With Balram, even his beginning made him feel like less than human. In that tea shop, men, I say, but better to call them human spiders. They go crawling in between and under the tables with rags in their hands. Crushed humans in crushed uniforms, sluggish, unshaven, in their 30s or 40s or 50s, but still boys. But that is your fate if you do your job well. Instead of wiping out spots from tables and crushing coals for the oven, I used my time at the tea shop in Lakshmangarh to spy on every customer at every table and overhear everything they said. I decided that this was how I would keep my education going forward. That's the good thing I'll say for myself. Just like Dave, they both gained their knowledge in the streets. But here's the thing, Adiga was trying to say about people who gain knowledge this way. Me and thousands of others in this country like me are half-baked because we were never allowed to complete our schooling. Open our skulls, look in with penlight, and you'll find an odd museum of ideas, sentences of history or mathematics, remembered from school's textbook. All these ideas, half-formed and half-digested and half-correct, mixed up with other half-cooked ideas in your head, and I guess these half-formed ideas bugger one another and make more half-formed ideas. This is what you act on and live with. There's this constant references to the 4 poets that he loves, but he always has trouble of remembering the 4th. We'll go back to this later, but for now, let's go to my next point. Let animals live like animals. Let humans live like humans. That's my whole philosophy in a sentence. There are plenty of fauna imagery in here, including the previously mentioned human spider. He referred to some people as animals like buffalo, stork, wild boar, raven, mongoose, lamb, rooster. Come to think of it, I realized I didn't even remember their actual names other than what Balram assigned them. Even he himself was referred to as a country mouse in the beginning by one of the fellow servants. You know, from the tale of the country mouse and the city mouse. A lot of sexual references as well relating to animals. Gandhi and Buddha images appears frequently throughout the book for 2 purposes. The first, to symbolize the meaningless culture that the people, especially the government and upper class practice. The portraits and the statue appears almost everywhere, as if that it's following Balram on his journey to witness the legacy that went unused, hence turning them into a meaningless symbol. Even in Lakshmangar, or darkness as often referred to as this book, situated nearby where Buddha supposedly found his enlightenment, which is to say that it is the other way around for Balram, since he emerged from the darkness of his birthplace into the light of the city in Delhi. Many of the corrupt events happening in the story happens in the presence of either Gandhi's portrait or his statue. You can't argue that, well, they have a lot of those in India, you can argue about that, but there is a purpose for it to be mentioned this way. I looked out a window to see a large bronze statue of a group of men. This is a well-known statue, which you will no doubt see in Delhi. At the head is Mahatma Gandhi, with his walking stick, and behind him follow the people of India being led from darkness to light. The mongoose squinted at the statue. What is about it? I've seen it before. We're driving past Gandhi after just having given a bribe to a minister. It's a joke, isn't it? Well, I agree. It is a fucking joke. I am perfectly aware that corruption exists everywhere, but it is when you can get away with something so blatantly obvious, that's when it is really critical. Corruption is supported by others who are affected by said corruption is just so messed up. And the main reason why in the world of the white tiger, it is not something that can be easily uprooted by an epic speech from Anil Kapoor, because corruption done by victims of corruption is also supported by the victims of said corruptor. The teacher who embezzled money that's supposed to go to the students, no one took actions on it because he wasn't paid by the government for months. You can't expect a man in a dung heap to smell sweet. Every man in the village knew that he would have done the same in his position. Some were even proud of him for having got away with it so cleanly. It's this cyclical nature of bad deeds that paints a really dark future. Remember how Gandhi and Buddha are everywhere, and that doesn't even count the supposed 3 million gods that have around them, and how it doesn't affect their conscience at all? If faith can't help you, then I'm not sure if anything can. But that doesn't mean that the 2 figures don't do anything. If anything, because of them, Balram actually becomes enlightened in his own way, in his own twisted way. One day, a cunning Brahmin trying to trick the Buddha asked him, "Master, do you consider yourself man or God?" The Buddha smiled and said, "Neither. I'm just one who has woken up while the rest of you are still sleeping." This line was actually in the trailer.
I'm just one who has woken up while the rest of you are still sleeping.
Like Anakin in episode 3, with the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, this was Balram's signal to enlightenment. His huge breaking out of the situation and becoming a social entrepreneur. Which takes us to... Now, what is a rooster coup? Balram explains it as the greatest thing to come out of the country. The roosters in the coop smell the blood from above. They see the organs of their brothers lying around them. They know they're next, yet they did not rebel. The very same thing is done with human beings in the country. Every day on the roads of Delhi, some chauffeur is driving an empty car with a black suitcase sitting on his back seat. Inside that suitcase is 1 million, 2 million rupees. If he took the money, he could go to America, Australia, anywhere and start a new life. Yet he takes that black suitcase where his master wants, puts it down where he is meant to, and never touches a rupee. Why? Because Indians are the most honest people, like the Prime Minister's booklet will inform you. Now here's the question. How does the Rooster Coup works, and can anyone break out of it? Which also Balaram answers. The answer to the first question is that the pride and glory of our nation, the repository of all our love and sacrifice, the Indian family, is the reason we are trapped and tied to the coup. The answer to the second question is that only a man who is prepared to see his family destroyed, hunted, beaten, and burned alive by the masters can break out of the coup. Now, the upper class also talks about the importance of family, but the effects are not quite in the same way. For them, family is pride, a symbol of honor and status. If you can maintain your family, you must be an amazing person. But for people like Balaram, family is a shackle for him and an insurance for his masters, which means that they don't really benefit him. I mean, like what normal people would. Which leads to one of the key principles of Buddhism, which is detachment. This is just something that I read, so feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Detachment, which is also expressed as non-attachment, is a state in which a person overcomes their attachment to desire for things, people, or concept of the world and thus attains a heightened perspective. It is considered a wise virtue and is promoted in various Eastern religions. If that sounds familiar to you, it is the same concept that inspires the Jedi of Star Wars and the one that led Anakin to the path of Vaderhood. Non-attachment really stems from misunderstanding of things being impertinent. When we attach to something, we suffer, and others suffer because we are holding on to things that are past their time. In Balaram's case, the relationship made his parents suffer, slowly killing his brother. He also suffers with constant manipulation and threats from his grandmother. In order to break free from the Rooster Coup, one must be removed from his worldly shackle. Considering his family is pretty much shit anyway, with the way his grandmother leeched off his father until he died, and now him and his brother, it's more in the social attachment for the sake of culture and not really emotional attachment. As a person who learns the hard way that family members can be snakes, I can totally relate. Now, it is not to say that familial ties should mean nothing. Most Asian families are very close-knit and we try as hard as we can to keep up with each other's development. Some can say we use the word kepo, some say it's concerned, but in my family there's both, and it is important to recognize which is which. If you don't remove yourself from toxic environment, then you might turn into Balaram's brother. Kishan has changed. He was thinner and darker. His neck tendons were sticking out in high relief above the deep clavicles. He had become, all of a sudden, my father. The point here is to know when to remove yourself from a toxic environment. Not to say that individualists are better, but the best of both worlds is probably the best way to go. Although he might have taken the non-attachment route to the extreme. Another thing about the Rooster Coup is how servants treat other servants, and what's sicker, the government itself is responsible for the mindset of its people. This really applies not just to India, but to every country in the world. You can know someone's mind, their psyche, and personality based on the media that they consume. Of course, civilian servants are secretly fantasizing about strangling their bosses, and that's why the government of India publishes this magazine and sells it on the streets for just 4.5 rupees so that even the poor can buy it. You see, the murderer in the magazine is so mentally disturbed and sexually deranged that not one reader would want to be like him. And in the end, he always gets caught by some honest, hardworking officer, or he goes mad and hangs himself by a bedsheet. This also highlights how this huge socio-economic gap is causing instability and demoralizing characters for personal gain. It's like a person with drug addiction, feeding their addiction so that they could function instead of helping them to function without their stash. As a result of this, there's bullying even among fellow servants. I've been to them all, but I've never stepped past the front door of one. We're not allowed to do that. There's usually a fat guard at the glass door up at the front. If he so much as sees a driver near the hotel, he'll glare. He'll shake a finger like a school teacher. That's the driver's fate. Every other servant he can boss over us. There seems to be this embedded desire to prevent your peers to step up and rise to another level. Servants need to abuse other servants. It's been bred into us. The way Alsatian dogs are bred to attack strangers. We attack anyone who's familiar. The Rooster Coup was doing its work. Servants have to keep other servants from becoming innovators, experimenters, or entrepreneurs. Yes, that's a sad truth, Mr. Premier. The coup is guarded from the inside. If there's more of this desire to corrupt each other, for Balram it comes in the form of a fellow driver who we only know as Vitiligo Lips. Or maybe I just don't know his name, or maybe I just forgot his name. It is important to know why he's called that. Not just because of his skin disease, but also because he always whispered the sinister ideas and constantly persuades Balram to con his masters, which ultimately he relents, of course. He is the voice of absurdity and might be a little evil. From the beginning of their meeting, VL was the one who gave Balram the nickname Country Mouse and giving him the advice on the dark ways of the city, like a city mouse. In the end, they're both mice in the city awaiting to be trampled on the streets or eaten by cats. The difference between these two is that Balram the country mouse was willing to break out of this barrier he has been stuck in for so long. As Balram's foil, VL is a representation of what could have been if Balram stayed a driver for long. Even by the end, you can tell that VL will just remain in the same place even though he started way before Balram. VL gained the satisfaction as a driver because he did minor sabotage that barely even dent the lives of his employers for two reasons. One, to make extra cash, and two, he's too afraid to leave. But from Balram's journey, we can tell it's not easy to get a new job. So he stayed and groveled and find some peace in the tiny shenanigans he committed behind his master's back. The difference between them is that Balram was actually sincere. Each side is eternally trying to hoodwink the other side, and it has been this way since the start of time. The poor wins a few battles, the peeing in the potted plants, the kicking of the pet dogs, but of course the rich have won the war for 10,000 years. Masochistic and sadistic nature of their lives is a cycle to release the tension they have from bowing down to the others. And for Balram, those feet he has to bow to are... From the description of these two people, we get to see they are the two people of consequences in Balram's life, not only of their personality, but also their position. Mr. Ashok's face reappears now in my mind's eye as it used to every day when I was in his service. It was such a handsome face that sometimes I couldn't take my eyes off it. Picture a 6-foot-tall fellow, broad-shouldered with a landlord's powerful, punishing forearms, yet always gentle. Now another face appears to the side of his, in memory's mirror. Pinky Madam, his wife, every bit as good looking as her husband, just as the image of the goddess in the Birla Hindu temple in New Delhi is as fair as the god to whom she is married. She would sit in the back and the two of them would talk, and I would drive them wherever they wanted, as faithfully as the servant god Hanuman carried about his master and mistress Ram and Sita. In the beginning of the journey, we can see how proud he was of serving the couple, especially with Ashok's display of a modernized value after studying in America, and with his NRI wife in tow. Ashok's kindness towards his servant gave Balram a sense of purpose, a sense of hope in his life. And which is why you'll be wondering, why would he kill this man if he worships him that much? Ashok becomes Balram's voice of reason in the beginning, where VL keeps trying to seduce him to like soliciting prostitute, etc. He persevered because of this image of Ashok, the kind-hearted master who is so cool in contrast to his more traditionalist brother, the mongoose. So speaking of which, I actually don't know what a mongoose is until the story, so yeah, thank you for filling in the gap in my knowledge. Ashok also came from Balram's hometown, the darkness, but Adiga is trying to further emphasize the social class between them, creating this stark contrast between the two men. Their similarities and differences somehow bridge the gap in this relationship. Ashok starts off as this wide-eyed young graduate getting into the family's dirty business. He had a vision, and he is trying to bring his modern ideology into this age-old system of dirty money. He's an extremely important character, and by killing him, Balram has essentially transformed himself from a servant into a master, or like he said it, an entrepreneur. Through Ashok and his family, he is still treated worse than animal though. The difference is that he respected Ashok because he is the man Balram wishes to be. They were both from Lakshmangar. The only difference is that he was born in the lower caste while Ashok was born in the high caste. So what gives? Because that kindness is merely on the surface level. Remember in Parasite where the mother said how the Parks could afford to be kind simply because they're rich? Although in principle, I believe kindness is a choice regardless of your socioeconomic status. But in here it applies. Adiga further emphasizes that their kindness is not without condition. Ashok's family called their long-term servant as family. And at some point, Balram was that to Ashok until he becomes an accessory to the crime and he's proud of it. I removed the Maharaja tunic and I went to sleep. I was tired as hell, but on my lips, there was a big contented smile that comes to one who has done his duty by his master, even in the most difficult moments. The moment that he realized no matter how kind Ashok was, in the end, people like him will always have to bear the brunt like a mule. No matter how many pats in the back he gets, he's still the one who gets treated like shit. His loyalty doesn't matter. The difference here is that he willingly becomes one because of Ashok's shiny appearance. The jails in Delhi are full of drivers who are there behind bars because they are taking the blame for their good, solid, middle-class masters. We have left the villages, but the masters still own us, body, soul, and arse. Doesn't the driver's family protest? Far from it. They would actually go about bragging. Their boy Balram had taken the fall, gone to Tihar jail for his employer. He was loyal as a dog. He was the perfect servant. The judges, wouldn't they see through this obviously forced confession? But they are in the racket too. They take their bribe, they ignore the discrepancies in the case, and life goes on for everyone but the driver. Ashok has family interests to protect, and so is Balram. He knew what would happen to his family if he betrayed his master. The three of them got their hands dirty and somehow they've lost their innocence from that event. Balram realized his loyalty is a farce to his master. Pinky realized what shit family she's married into, and Ashok slowly descends into the dark business of his family. It is here that Balram realized Pinky is the one real conscience in the family and gained newfound respect towards her. Only it was short-lived once she left Ashok. But where my genuine concern for him ended and where my self-interest began, I could not tell. No servant can ever tell what the motives of his heart are. Do we loathe our masters behind a facade of love? Or do we love them behind a facade of loathing? We are made mysteries to ourselves by the Rooster Coup we are locked in. Has there ever been a master-servant relationship like this one? He was so powerless, so lost. My heart just had to melt. Whatever anger I had against him for trying to pin Pinky's madam's hit-and-run killing on me passed away that evening. That was her fault. Mr. Ashok had nothing to do with it. I forgave him entirely. He spent much effort pulling Ashok out of the pit of depression, only to have it underappreciated. Pinky in the movie has much more impact on Balram. She was the one who gave him the sign with the couplet.
You were looking for the key for years, but the door was always open.
Which is a pleasant change. It's as if with Pinky gone, the modern, lighthearted youth in him just went with her. He returned from America an innocent man, but life in Delhi corrupted him. And once the master of the Honda City becomes corrupted, how can the driver stay innocent? He blames Pinky, he blames the city. Well, to me, you can get a man out of the city, but you can't get a city out of the man. Remember how Ashok and Balram are somehow images of one another? Ashok can only complain about his state of being, blaming everyone else but himself for his ordeal when we know he is more than capable of changing his own fate. The weakness of Ashok highlights Balram's capability. Ashok, being influenced by his brother, has begun plans to replace Balram, and Balram's anger and resentment has taken root due to his master's betrayal. Balram thought he'd control over his own life by being a loyal servant, but only by taking a life he forged his own future. If before he was the one being owned, but Ashok's death made him the owner. Here's a strange fact. Murder a man and you feel responsible for his life. Possessive even. You know more about him than his father and mother. They know his fetus, you know his corpse. Only you can complete the story of his life. Only you know why his body has to be pushed into the fire before its time. So he concluded Ashok's life. But what about his? My answer to that question is yes and no. He's in the grave and still sort of half-baked. In the end, he doesn't end the cycle, he merely joined it. He claims to be the lesser of two evils as he paid off the police and gives the family of the victim of the car accident compensation, and the family joins in also. He even adopts some of his master's old habits like yoga, the chandeliers, and Ashok's name. Although he does improve on some things that we learn from his time as a servant, he's being professional with all of his employees and he draws the line pretty well. Remember the Gandhi motifs? Even he is in the presence of his action. The big man sat at a huge desk with shiny badges on his khaki uniforms and the red marks of religion on his forehead. Behind him were 3 portraits of gods, but not the one I was looking for. Oh, thank God. There was one of Gandhi too. He thought that he's now the man of the world, but through his language use in writing those emails contains plenty of racial slurs and references to those pseudo-science beliefs that everyone parents get through WhatsApp news. Like, Ashok, you can get a man out of darkness, but you really can't get the darkness of a man. As much as he thought he is in the light. But why did he write those emails? Why did he confess to killing Ashok? What kind of reaction was he trying to evoke from the Prime Minister? In the book, it was never shown, but in the movie, he barely gets a response. You can either interpret it as the man freaked out over what he read, or simply dismiss Balram as madman. Either or, the fact that the confession to murder, when ignored, showed how hopeless it is for people holding on to the justice system. Remember the 4 poets? He never remembered the 4th one till the end, which is just a symbolic way of saying his knowledge of the world will always be incomplete, half-baked. The last line talks about his justification for the murder. Even if all my chandeliers came crashing down to the floor, even if they throw me in jail and have all the other prisoners dip their beaks into me, even if they make me walk the wooden stairs to the hangman's noose, I'll never say I made a mistake that night in Delhi when I slit my master's throat. I'll say it was all worthwhile to know, just for a day, just for an hour, just for a minute, what it means not to be a servant. In principle, I wouldn't glorify violence, no matter what your situation is. But I'm not trying to get on my moral high ground. To be perfectly honest, if I walk a mile in Balram's shoes, God knows what my choices would be. I won't dare to say I won't do what he did, but I know I would be tempted to do so. That was a long one. Actually, there's a lot more to unpack in this novel, but I'll leave it for you to decipher. If I were to cover all this video would take like twice as long. The book and the movie doesn't have that much of a difference. I think it is quite a faithful adaptation with minor changes that doesn't affect the main message. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did I miss anything or misunderstood something from the book? I highly recommend you reading it if you haven't. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. For the next review, I will delve into the world of Insta poems. So hope to see you in the next video. So thank you. Bye.